and welcome to this special edition of the Nobody Asked Me Guy Show. I'm your host, Melvin Casey Lars, and this evening we have a very special guest. Our special guest is Dr. Cassei Williams, LSU professor, and she's a candidate, ladies and gentlemen. She's in the runoff for the Bese Board, District 4. So we're sure that you guys are very interested in what's going on. We know that education is paramount to our students, and paramount, I should be saying, to not only to the students, but to the parents. And we will be speaking this evening. Dr. Williams, good evening.
Good evening.
Well, listen, it's a pleasure to have you here. And I want you to know, first and foremost, and I want my guests to know, that I am definitely a staunch supporter, and I'm encouraging them, even before this conversation gets started, to make sure that they understand that Dr. Cassei Williams is District 4, and she will be one of the candidates for the Bese Board, one of two. And as we finish this conversation, guys, you will know that Dr. Williams is the best possible candidate, hands down. I would like to share just a little bit with you, referencing Dr. Williams. And as all of us know, there's so much conversation about who's running for school board, who's running for this, who's running for that, and the third. However, when you have a quintessential educator such as Dr. Williams, then it speaks for itself. You know, we can give you a long resume and a long bio and that kind of thing, but she's going to address her own bio. So we want you guys to sit back, take a listen, and just understand very clearly that we're here tonight just to give you clarity so that you will know that you are making the right choice when you go and vote in District 4. And good evening, Dr. Williams.
Good evening.
Well, listen, as we've stated, we're so happy to have you here, and we don't want to waste your time with a lot of unnecessary pontification and cookie cutter questions. So, you know, we'll just jump right in. And first of all, I just like to say, not only are we happy that you're here, we will also share with our audience that from the thumbs up they have going up over here already and the hearts up, that we see that they're happy that you're here too. So listen, our first question will be, you know, if you'll please just kind of share a little bit with our audience the significance of having the right person on their board of education.
So I firmly believe that it is critical that we have an experienced educator in our Bese seat for District 4. And when I say Bese, I'm talking about the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. And these are the people who make direct the policy decisions that are going to directly impact teacher instruction and their ability to practice evidence-based practices within the classroom. They also oversee the allocation of funding and resources to the schools through the MFP formula. And those folks, that board, that group of folks who are making those decisions, everything they do impacts teachers, impacts our students and their outcomes. And it's important that we have an educator in that seat so they know, somebody that knows the teacher struggle, that knows what these kids need, that knows what these teachers need, and has been in the trenches before as a fellow comrade, you know. And it's so important that we have somebody in our seat for District 4, especially that represents that teacher need and student need directly. This isn't a political stepping stone, and we can't have somebody in the seat that this is a political stepping stone for, because that means that they're not going to be fully in it. They're not going to be fully dedicated to making the decisions necessary to ensure that our students are being put in a position to be successful, and that's unacceptable. That would be a complete disservice to the entire district.
Absolutely, it would be. And may I piggyback just quickly to our audience, being a former high school principal, being a former central office administrator, and I worked for the Michigan Department of Education, quite honestly, excuse me, as a consultant during the No Child Left Behind situation. And let me tell you, just having been a high school principal and an administrator for over 28 plus years, how I can't tell you how many times we have had the conversation that Dr. Williams is alluding to right now. We talk about all the time how nice it would be to have someone in the position that actually understood and knew about education. And guys, as we know, I have to say this to them, Dr. Williams, in our last administration, and we can call her name because it was public, with Bese DeVos, did not have a clue about education, but she was sitting at one of the highest offices in the educational realm. So you have to understand how important this is. But enough of my babbling. Dr. Williams, if we can move on a little further, what are some of the critical areas of education that need to be addressed, by our Bese board?
So the foundation of my entire platform is ensuring that we are providing an equitable education to every student in the state of Louisiana. And when I say equitable, when I'm talking about equity, I'm talking about fairness. I'm talking about impartiality, where we are approaching the formula in which we're funding and providing resources to school in a needs-based fashion, where individual schools who don't have the resources or the funding to put all the tools in their students' hands that they need to be successful, those schools have those resources brought to them. Instead of taking money out of the neighborhood public schools and sending it with the students who leave those failing schools to charter schools and more privatized institutions, why don't we leave that money at the neighborhood schools so they have the resources to hire more highly qualified teachers, to get more resources in the students' hands so we can put those students in a position to be successful. And that's so critical. And the first part about addressing that need is re-looking at the MFP formula and redirecting that formula to where it's more of a needs-based formula and not a bunch of mathematical jargon that our administrators and our superintendents don't really understand to begin with. It's so very important that we completely break down and do a paradigm shift or a shift in thinking or shift in mindset, right? On how we are going to address school needs. Because if we are not doing everything we can to put these schools that are failing in a position to be successful, then once again, we are doing them a grave disservice. And we are going to continue to churn out kids that have graduated high school that are not thriving, contributing members of society. And if we want to keep contributing mediocre adults, then we can keep doing what we're doing. But if we want change, if we really want to produce some individuals who graduate high school and know what their civic duty is, some individuals that are going to be voters one day, then we have to ensure that we are reinvesting in public education.
Now, I have a question from Ms. Lydia. And Lydia is asking, what is an MFP?
The MFP is the minimum foundation program. And that is the formula in which it has a lot of moving parts. If I looked at the formula myself, I wouldn't know what was going on. And I have a whole PhD. I've taken lots of math classes and I still would not know what was going on. However, the foundation of it is based a lot on test scores, a lot on student attendance and the population size of that school. So that's when I'm saying the MFP dollars, so the dollars that are being allocated to that school are based on how many students are going there. But if a student leaves that school, the money that would go to the school to support that student in that building, right, leaves with that student and goes to the other school. And when we're talking about other schools, we're not talking about other public schools. We're talking about other charter schools, other more privatized schools. That private schools and charter schools get MFP dollars. They get taxpayer dollars, even though they are not being held to the same level of accountability and the same standards that our public schools are being held to. And I firmly believe that private schools and charter schools should not get a dime of taxpayer dollars unless they're going to be held to the same accountability standards as our public schools. If a charter school wants to give a kid a quality education, let them. That is the cornerstone of what they promise. But we cannot fund them if they are not going to have the same standards of accountability, not provide the same services that all of our public schools have to provide.
Well, allow me, Dr. Williams, as a former consultant for the Michigan Independent School District, just what you've just finished saying, I say Michigan Education District, is that there were so many times that we visited various schools, charter schools, etc. And it was very difficult for me to wrap my head around, having been a public school principal, etc., to see how many marks that we had to overlook because they were not held to the same standards as the public schools. How many, certain sections you have to check this off, check that off, check that off. However, it did not apply, just as you've already said, to your charter and private schools, parochial schools, etc. And it is a great gap there. And many times the parents are not nearly aware. Some lobbyists come in and they talk about and you know this already, but some of our audience may not be clear on that. The lobbyists come in and they talk about the charter schools and how great they're going to be, yada, yada, yada. Many times they get to, as we well know, get to handpick and they get to eliminate those students that they feel like is not going to help them, which leads us into our next question. Now, as you shared so eloquently, those two very important critical issues of working with our schools and helping all schools and not putting a laser just on one set of schools, how will you advocate for those areas to be addressed and ultimately infused?
So before I can even advocate for these schools, I have to have a direct line of contact that is completely transparent and completely open between myself and those superintendents, between myself and those school boards, between myself and those teachers, community members, and parents. Because I cannot sit in a seat and say I'm representing student, teacher, and community needs if I do not have a direct line of communication and open contact with those communities, point blank, period. So in order to advocate them, I would advocate for them. I would be communicating with them and I would know exactly what their needs are. And in knowing what their needs are, I could vote in favor of the things that I know are going to benefit our district and keep our district held at this, because I have very high standards. I have very high standards for my students. I have very high standards for this district. And I believe that we can, if we make some changes, and it's not going to happen overnight. But if we make some changes, we can reach those standards without question. But we need someone like myself who's going to stand up and advocate for student needs and advocate for teacher needs and community needs. Because I promise you, I believe that the public education center, the schools, should be a community hub. Back in the day, people used to be able to go to the school for resources, especially in our rural areas where they don't have the community resources for impoverished families that they do in the urban areas. So when we don't have that, we need schools, the public schools, to function as a community hub. And if we don't have time, and if we don't have individuals who are advocating for that type of culture, that type of climate in our public school system, then we once again are doing our constituency a grave disservice. And the goal is to never do my people a disservice. I want to represent their needs in the best ways that I know how. And I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and tell you that I know every single thing that I'm supposed to do every single day of this job. I don't. But I have really good instincts. I do have the experience as a public educator. I've matriculated through the K-12 education system all the way up to a PhD. I've been a proponent and advocate for public education since the day I walked into my first classroom. And I promise you this, if it's going to hurt public education, if it's going to go away from the needs of my public education classrooms and those teachers and those students, then once again, I'm doing them a disservice, and I should step down. I shouldn't have the job. It's as simple as that. And I would not tell you to vote for me. I would not ask you for votes if my intentions were in the wrong place. Because at the end of the day, it's about the kids. And if we can't meet kids' needs, if we can't put them in a position to be successful, then we're setting them up for failure. And that should never be the goal.
Wow. Now, next question, actually, you've really pretty much answered the next question. However, I'd like to ask it anyway, because I see some hands going up over here and I will acknowledge them in a moment. But do you feel that our parents are given sufficient academic information to prepare their children for various levels of academics?
So I believe that parents are doing the best they can with what they have. A lot of our parents in this district are just trying to survive. So if their kids aren't growing up or being born into these literary rich environments where their kids have the opportunity to be read to for 30 minutes to an hour every night, to play with numbers and fall in love with learning, right? Then we need to put these families in a position to have those resources provided to their kids. And that's when we go into pre-K 3. And in going into pre-K 3, we have to communicate with parents from the time these kids are 3 years old. And I believe in birth to 3, but that's a whole nother conversation for a whole other day. but we have to get with these parents by offering universal access to pre-K education. And with providing that universal access to pre-K education, we can also provide adult education. And if we're providing adult education, and I'm not trying to say like having our parents taking college courses or unless that's something that they want to do, right? But I want them to be trained with the skills so they can help their kid with Common Core mathematics. Not that I'm a fan of Common Core. I think Common Core is the devil because it does not help any kid in special education. And I'm a special educator. I'm an advocate for the kids with disabilities every single day till the day I die. But I promise you, if we can educate these parents just on the basic skills they need to help their kid be successful, then they're going to do that. They're going to make whatever sacrifices they need to ensure their child is successful. No parent wants to see their child fail. And if we give the parents the resources and tools they need to help put their child in a position to be successful, then we're going to see more kindergartners come in with the skills they need to be an emergent reader. We're going to see more first graders, second graders on grade level for reading and mathematics. And then we have to realize that in third grade, we stop learning to read and start reading to learn. So if they can be on grade level at second grade, that means they're going to be on grade level at third grade, and they will be ready to start reading to learn. And that's when we can teach them real content, and we can throw in more science and social studies and more expanded abstract concepts in mathematics and ELA. But we can't do that unless our parents have the resources to get their kids in pre-K3 and early childhood education, unless we invest in that. And I know people are like, well, that's going to cost money. Where's that money going to come from? Hey, I know the government's not going to give it to us, but I promise you there are grants out there like the Ford Foundation. There are people out there with checkbooks and they want to write checks, but we have to take the initiative and reach out and grab the money. And unless we write grants or employ someone or get a volunteer who has a grant writing background and can write us quality grants so we can hit on those grants and win, then we're not taking the initiative that we need to be proactive in getting this early childhood education problem solved.
Wow, very, very powerful. And again, the hands are going up and the hearts are flowing. So that's exactly what we always want here on the Nobody Asked Me Guy show. But listen, if you had to make a single address to the parents, and you've just done a fabulous job already, but if you had to make a single address to the parents as you are advocating for them and their children, what might that be?
I would tell my parents to have faith, because I'm going to do whatever it takes to ensure that we have highly qualified teachers in our classrooms, that we have curriculum that makes it learning accessible to all students, no matter what their ability or inability is, and it makes it accessible across all subject areas. And when I'm saying have faith, I don't want them to just have faith in me. I'm just one person. I'm just one vote on that board. However, I could be a catalyst in changing the system, the way that Louisiana education is functioning right now. And because I have this experience as an educator, I'm going to make decisions that are going to positively, instead of adversely, impact classroom practice. It's going to positively impact classroom practice and teachers' ability to have quality instruction and provide quality educations.
Wow, that's very powerful. But, you know, may I say before we move a little further, is that is what parents never get, what you've just shared. There's so much work to be done and so much understanding to take place. And as a principal, I'll be very honest, I used to really enrage a lot of my teachers because I'd share with, and my colleagues, is that, first of all, when we waste time blaming the parents for the lack of student education, then why do they need us? Secondly, if we're the geniuses and we think kids are not learning because of their parents, then we should have figured something out already. So everything that you're touching upon is extremely important, and I certainly can appreciate it as one of your supporters. And I say that incessantly to our listeners. I say that incessantly to those individuals that will be tuning in and watching this at a later time. So we just need them to understand that. What is your message to the voters that may be undecided?
So I'm going to speak candidly here. At times in this race, I've been called a radical, or I've been told that I'm too liberal to control our schools. And one, a Bese seat does not mean I control anything. This is your world. I just run around in it. I'm just one vote on a board. That is all. But I'm not radical. If wanting our kids to have all the resources and tools they need to be put in a position to be successful makes me radical, so be it. But I promise you, every person who's watching this, I believe every person in this state, at the end of the day, deep down inside, they want our kids to be put in a position to be successful. I'm just trying to give them the tools to do that. I'm just trying to give our schools the tools to do that. I'm trying to enable success here. Too many times we've been setting our kids up for failure, and we've been enabling that ability to fail and that consistent failure over the last, I don't know how many years. And that's because we haven't had an experienced educator making decisions and policy decisions for our school teachers and for our school buildings that know exactly how they're going to impact these teachers and can positively make changes that can have an impact that goes far deeper than just one vote on one issue, right? That can hopefully, develop an alliance within the board to where we're making decisions that not only help our urban schools or our suburban schools or our more affluent neighborhoods, but are really getting deep down into the roots of rural areas where we're closing the digital divide between our urban schools and suburban schools and the rural areas, where we're closing the achievement gap between, minority students and non-minority students, where we're closing all the gaps, all the crutches, the buzzwords that we utilize as crutches to allow for the excuses to be made for our failures, right? We need somebody who's going to stand against the grain, who's going to probably ruffle some feathers, and I've been known to do that. But my intentions are pure. I'm in it for the kids. That's my message. My message is a vote for me is a vote for equitable education for every student in this district and every student in the state of Louisiana. A vote for me is a vote for a teacher that is for the teachers, that knows what teacher needs are, that knows what student needs are, and is going to stand in place and represent those needs. Because I am just the vessel. This is my purpose. This is what I do. Education is in my DNA. And because of that, I have been called to do this. This is something I prayed on. This is not something I took lightly. It's not something that I just woke up one day and was like, I'm going to run for Bese. God and I had a long talk, and I felt I was called to do this, and that's why we're here.
Listen, as we close, allow me to say to my listeners that the buzzwords for asking for equality will always be you are radical and you're too liberal. So I need my audience to understand that when they hear those two words, just think equality. When a person starts asking for equality, now you are radical, buzzword. Now you're too liberal, buzzword, because of equality. So we need our parents to understand that. And I just want my audience to understand. So listen, Dr. Williams, it has certainly been eye-opening. It has certainly been enlightening. And you have shared with us just a treasure trove of information that our parents and our listeners can take with them. Are there any parting comments you'd like to share at this time?
Please get out to vote this Saturday, April 24th. I believe voting goes on from 8:30 to 7 p.m. To find your polling location, you can go to govote.com, or is it .org? I believe it's .org. Govote.org, and that should, all you have to do is put in your information. It'll tell you exactly where you need to go vote at. If you're not registered to vote this time, win or lose, I'm running again. So get registered in the meantime, and I'll see you the next roll. But I need your votes, and I need you to take a car full of people every time you go out to vote. If you give rides to the polls, I appreciate that too, because we need our folks to get out and vote. Because when we all vote, we all win. It's plain and simple. But we got to get out and vote first. If you have any questions about myself or my platform, you can see all of my details at williamsforbese.com. If you want to follow us on Facebook, it's at Dr. Williams for Bese. That's what you search, the little @ symbol, and then Dr. Williams #4 Bese. And then it's the same for Twitter at Dr. Williams for Bese. Please reach out if you have any questions. I'm always available. And if I'm not available, I will make time for you, because that's how much I believe in having that relationship with my constituency. Thank you for having me here. I really appreciate this opportunity. I hope you guys have a blessed evening.
Listen, we thank you for being here. And on behalf of my listeners, is that we have certainly been enlightened, and there's no way anyone can walk away and be confused about who they should vote for. Yes, I shamelessly share that my vote is going to be for Dr. Cassei Williams. This has been Melvin Casey Lars, your host of the Nobody Asked Me Guy show. Guys, go out and tell your friends about this podcast. Have them to look on YouTube, because we will be broadcasting this again on YouTube. and look on Anchor. You will find us on 5 or 6 platforms, and you can hear this again. Please feel free to share it with your friends, those that have already made up their minds and those that are on the fence. So again, we thank Dr. Williams so very much. Want you guys to have a great and blessed evening. Dr. Williams, thank you for being here, and we do applaud your efforts.
Thank you. I really